Yeah, now we'll depend on using one more small construct in Excel or in VBA. That construct is more like, let us say if I am more interested in finding out what is the last active row, right? Sometimes I may have to do some kind of a looping so many times, right? So till now we have been using player count. Player count is telling the total number of rows in which the data is present. But let us assume that there is one blank row or few blank rows like this. The player count, it will still show me 8861 itself. It will not show me 8863. Count or count A function, they typically don't count the blank rows or blank columns. Blank cells they don't count. So this will still be shown as 8861 itself, though my data has gone up to 8863. Now because of this, the problem that typically comes out for us, right, because of this the problem that typically comes out for us is how many, up to how many rows. But when I say the looping, it has to happen till the last, not up to the counting. So sometimes, especially when my data has blank rows or blank columns in between, the counting cannot be done directly through a count A or count kind of functions. See here, if it does not give me the value as 8863 and it gives us 8861, then probably there will be a problem with these two records. Similarly, anywhere else also, if there are some blank rows, or if you just imagine how many cells should the highlighting happen. We have intentionally selected 10 columns, right? We did offset where we have put active cell and active cell comma 10. So how do I know 10? Probably if one more record is increased or one more column is increased, will I make it 11 again? If I have to make them 11 and all every time, then probably the dynamicness is lost. So if at all I want to find out the last active row or the last active column, instead of going from the top, we go from the bottom. We start from the bottom and see where exactly is the first non-active data or active data is present. That row number is what I will pull out instead of doing a counting, right? So probably I'll use one more function here. I'll say sub row column count. I'm trying to count how many rows and how many columns are there in my data, right? Not using a count function, but another construct which will start from the last, start moving upwards. The place where it encounters the first active value, it will identify the row corresponding to that, which means whatever may be the number of blank rows in between, it really does not get impacted because of that. Getting it? So I'll write something like, okay, I'll dim some row count, let's say as long, because my rows may be more, and dim call count, let's say probably as integer, right? I will say row count is equal to range. First I'll go to A 10 lakhs, probably the last, a very high value, almost to the last. dot end. End is start moving backwards. How? In the upward direction. Excel up. So from there you move in the upward direction till you encounter a non-blank value in the A column. Right? Dot row. Get the row number of that one. Get the row number. So this is a very good construct, especially coming from bottom to ITC. My intention is which row has the last data. Right? Which row has the last data. Probably count can still tell me that this is the last row. But count or count A will fail when there are some blank rows in between. Only when all the rows have some data. See, when I am counting on the A column, when all the rows of the A column has data mandatorily, then count is sufficient to get my value. But if there are 1 or 2 rows or 10 rows, or if there is a possibility that not all values are mandatory, then count will be a flop. So, but this model, go to the last, come up, wherever the first non-blank occurrence has come, stop there, get the row number of that. That way of determining the row count is much more effective than simply doing a count. See, count you can do only when you have all values mandatory. Even if one value is missing, or if you think one value also can miss, there is a possibility of a blank row or a blank column, then it's not advisable to go with count. It's better advisable to find the total number of rows using this formula. End Excel up. So go to the last, go to that location called A 10 lakhs, go in the upward direction till you encounter the end of the non-blank and the start of the, encounter the end of blank and you encounter a non-blank value. Right? Similarly, I can do the same for call count. Call count, I'll simply say range. This time I'll go to the extreme right. The last row in Excel is except D1. The last column. Except D is just like A, B, C columns. The last column is except D. If you see in the Excel sheet, except D is the column which is the last. So I'll go to that except D1. Do the same thing. Dot end. This time I move to the left. Excel to left. So there is an Excel to left. Dot column. Get the column number of that. That is what I call as total number of columns. Instead of using count or count A kind of function, sometimes this is also another mechanism which is more effective to count your number of rows and columns for using it in the loops. Right? If you try looking at this, just running it, row count is 8863 this time and call count is 11. So what you can very well do, once you have done these two, probably here you can even, instead of doing a player count and all, you could have done this exercise. So probably the other better way is I copy these two things, right? Wherever. This is where we have done it, right? So here I will paste this row count, column count and all. I know that this is the row count, this is the column count and all that stuff. So here what I will simply do is, this all will remain the same. Instead of player count, I will do row count. For the last one, I don't need -1 because there is nothing after that, no? And instead of 10, I'll put call count -1. So that even if my data grows, I am more and more comfortable. Right? If it is 10, if at all one more new column is inserted in your data, you will have a problem. It will still highlight only up to 10 columns or 11 columns. But if I have something like this, call count -1, at least it will execute it much better. So this time we'll run this again to check it out. The last active row. Huh. Indicate 10 lakhs to? Yeah, it's almost a big number because we have the big thing is 10 lakhs 48,000 is the last. So just I'm taking up to 10 lakh and then coming. This is the one 10 lakhs 48,570. No, it's a number. That's where I just take 10 lakhs because it's very rare the data goes beyond that. Right, so that way it can still highlight our data. So end is also a very good function to use, another extra construct, right, which will give us the last active row or the last active column, which can be used for again for the looping purpose. Right, instead of doing a counting for the number of rows and columns, especially when my data has a lot of these blanks and all, it would be much more better. Right, now my next question goes, okay, I'll take it as a small case. Yeah, that